I want to start with the attack from Obama on the Trump administration on its handling of the coronavirus outbreak. Let's have a look at what Obama had to say.
This pandemic has shaken up the status quo and laid bare a lot of our country's deep-seated problems, from massive economic inequality to ongoing racial disparities to a lack of basic health care for people who need it. It's woken a lot of young people up to the fact that the old ways of doing things just don't work.
Aaron Patrick, his comments follow a big story in the Financial Times as well that claims Donald Trump was very slow to actually, take seriously this pandemic. What do you make of Obama's comments?
Well, Shari, these comments are clearly designed to influence the presidential election and to hit Trump where he's weakest, which is overseeing, this catastrophic failure of once great nation. And as that FT story reported, America's been first on this. First in number of infections and first in number of deaths. And this is a pivotal and sad moment in the history of a great nation. And Obama is trying to make sure that Trump's held responsible for that.
I mean, Miranda, he's very firmly politicising the crisis here. What do you make of that while America's still trying to deal with it and there's, so many thousands of people dying every single day?
Well, it's the clear, ruthless MO for the upcoming election. This is what the Democrats are going to do. First of all, they're going to hang every single death around Donald Trump's neck. And then they will also blame him for the shattered economy, while at the same time, Democratic governors are refusing to allow people to open up the economy. You see all over the country these protests where people are saying, let me open up my barber, let me open up my hair salon, don't throw me in jail for it, which is what's happening. And so this is the sort of two-pronged quite clever tactic that they're using. And at the same time, it suits the Democrats to keep the economy closed for as long as possible because that allows them to keep their very lacklustre candidate, Joe Biden, in witness protection, hiding in his basement, doing this sort of election campaigning, because as soon as they have to get him out of the basement and put him on a debate stage opposite Donald Trump, he will just melt because he just, as we know, is cognitively impaired. But as long as they can keep him under wraps, they think that they have a chance of winning because they're going to let Donald Trump lose, in fact.
Miranda, just sticking with you, what is the vibe in the States at the moment? And I imagine it does vary substantially from each state, and especially depending on how well each state is doing with the coronavirus. But do you think the blame here is squarely landing at Trump's feet, or do you think people are questioning their governor's response to it, or are people saying, look, this is because China covered up the virus and we didn't realise how serious it was early enough?
Look, not at all. I think that FT story, the Financial Times story, is typical of that outsider view from the left, really, of America and its response, because in reality, 1/3 of the deaths, for instance, in America were at nursing homes. And in some states, 80% of the deaths, or 88%, I think, of the deaths in Wisconsin, or one of the states, was in nursing homes. And you have my colleague Michael Goodwin in the New York Post has written brilliantly on this. And you have New York and New Jersey. Their governors, Andrew Cuomo and Governor Murphy in New Jersey, decided to make a rule that nursing homes were forced to take back corona-positive patients from hospital. And that meant that the virus just spread like wildfire in these nursing homes when we knew from very early on that the elderly were most at risk. And you see the contrast in Florida, which has really escaped almost unscathed from the coronavirus, and yet it has an enormous elderly population, a lot of old people in nursing homes. And the governor down there, Ron DeSantis, just from the very beginning made the common sense decision to protect old people in nursing homes, not to send back COVID positive patients, but to actually take patients out of the nursing homes and put them into hospitals. Why on earth that didn't happen in New York and New Jersey is just reprehensible. And then the other issue you had in New York, of course, was as late as the middle of March, you had the really hopeless mayor, de Blasio, just telling everyone, oh, go out, go to the theatre, get out and about, party on, don't worry about this virus. We need you to get on the subway and do your thing. And at that time, we knew that there were thousands of infections in New York, very dense city. And there is a report showing that actually the subway, New York would be one of the great cities in the world where it's a very egalitarian public transport situation. Everybody catches the subway because it's the quickest way to get around the city and it's very efficient. But the subway seemed to have been a really terrible vector of the virus, and particularly the people who lived further out of Manhattan had very little opportunity. They couldn't just catch a cab like a Manhattanite could. They had to catch the subway and they caught the disease. So those issues, I think people on the ground who live in those cities understand why their cities were so ravaged. And I think people also understand that Donald Trump, while, he did make mistakes and was slow in terms of closing the borders to Europe, and seeing as how I think more than half the infections in New York came from Europe, but he did close the borders on January 31 to China. And he was told not to by his experts, including Anthony Fauci, who's, the much sainted expert, was told not to close them down. And Joe Biden, in fact, called him a xenophobe, and he was called a racist. The World Health Organization said, don't do it. China said, don't do it. This is, racist to shut the borders to China. And in fact, that would have been a very important way of slowing the spread of the disease.